Good evening, families. I'm going to go ahead and start this presentation about school calendars. You might have seen some news about school calendars. Our school is like all the other schools at APS. In APS, we're going to be making calendar decisions about which calendar families want, which calendar staff wants, and then if the two agree, we're going to come up with a new calendar. If we don't agree, then or we agree to the traditional calendar, that's the calendar that we're going to have. I'm going to go through all of that with you this evening. It's a little bit of a process. It also gives us an opportunity to think about how we want, what you might see education look like at Los Ranchos. And that opportunity is going to start right now. Is everybody who needs interpretation services have a set of listening devices? Can our interpreter raise her hand and say what her name is again? I can't remember. Is it?
My name is Cecilia.
Cecilia. Cecilia is providing interpretation services for us tonight. So if you need interpretation services, please raise your hand. She'll set you up with a headphone, and that'll be great.
¿Necesitan interpretación? Por favor, levante la mano. ¿No? Okay.
Excellent. There was some legislation that went into place after an important law case happened. It was the Martinez-Yazzie case that basically said there's students that are being underserved in New Mexico, and the PED has an obligation to make sure that they're served better. And so that legislation, that's it in a nutshell. It's not complicated, but it is important. I can provide you with the actual documentation around Martinez-Yazzie, or Yazzie-Martinez, whichever direction you want to go with that. But it is important that you know that the reason why this calendar is even being discussed is because there was a law case that said, look, kids in New Mexico schools are being underserved. And they happen to be either Hispanic or Native American, and we know that that's a large percentage of our population here, and that needs to change. And so they needed to do some things to fix that. So that's the impetus for this. The legislation said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to provide a bunch of money, and you can extend your calendar by 10 days. So I'm going to go over some of the meeting goals, and that's one of the reasons is why, and I'm going to get into that again. We're going to deepen the understanding of the 2021 calendar options. I'm going to state the expectations for staff and community calendar review meetings and voting. I'm going to give you some K-5 plus summer school information in case you did not get it. So remember I talked about a little bit about the calendar options and why we're even discussing them. It's because of this House Bill 5 and Senate Bill 1, which was signed by the governor, and it gave a funding opportunity for schools. It said add 10 more days to the school calendar, and then add a minimum of 80 non-instructional hours per school year for professional development for instructional staff. That's what those bills said. The idea was to spur innovation and reform, ultimately to expand educational opportunities for students. And I think that's the important part of that is to expand educational opportunities for students. The APS Calendar Committee created 3 calendar options to align with the legislation and PED regulations around it. Those 3 calendars were approved by the Board of Education in December, right before we went on winter holiday. So that's why we're here today. What the PowerPoint would like me to do is have you turn and talk and discuss, well, how can the learning calendar year spur innovation and reform in your school? And so I'd like you to do that for a second. If you want to talk to the people that are next to you, the people that you brought here, and we'll do that for about a minute and a half. If you want to turn to the person next to you and talk about how can the extended learning calendar year options spur innovation and reform in your school? How could more days on your calendar make innovation and reform? opportunities to chat with each other and talk and discuss things and take opportunities. Yes. Okay. I broke my clicker. So the next thing, and I think we talked about this, so I might go this 30 seconds on this. How can schools use additional 10 days to impact student achievement? Because that's one of the things that the legislation wants to have happen. Can 10 days for achievement? So let's just spend about 30 seconds talking about that. Okay. And I'm going to skip this one just a little bit because this is more for families, and I just want to talk about it for a second though. With this legislation, it increases more time for staff to be together to get professional development. It adds, currently we have 31 hours about. It would add an additional 48 hours if we added 10 days into the calendar year. So we would add an additional 48 hours for staff to work together for professional development. How they did that would be done through our instructional council. How are we making this decision and what are the expectations? So it's pretty simple. Every school must conduct a staff and community vote to determine if the school will remain on the traditional 184-day calendar or move to the 194-day calendar. Every school, high schools, middle schools, elementary schools, they're all doing a vote. Now there's been some information out there that high schools are not doing a calendar vote, but they are. They're just choosing between one or two calendars, either to stay at the traditional one or add 5 days on at the end and 5 days in on both ends of the traditional calendar. I'll get into what the calendars look like, and you have them in your packet already. Here's the timeline for expectations about what's going to happen, and this is, from the school board. This happened on January 9th, where I went to a meeting at the district. I was just after we got back from vacation. And they said, here's what you're going to do. And they said, you're going to do this meeting that we're having tonight. You're going to do a meeting with the staff, and then you're going to have a vote. And your instructional council, which is the council of teachers and myself and union rep and family that meets at the school to determine what the curriculum and the work that we're going to do in classrooms is, you're going to determine how that looks. So I had to, by the 17th of last week, I had to have that meeting with the instructional council, and that happened. And then by the 24th, so the date for the 24th and the 31st, both the staff meeting and the community meeting, the family meeting, have to happen before the 31st of January. That's the requirement. And then we're supposed to get the votes in before the 31st also. And that gives me, so if there's anything that comes up from that, they give themselves a leeway until February 12th to turn in our actual, what the determination was. Go over some of the details on how that's going to happen here in a second. But that's the timeline that they've given us for this. The reason for that quick timeline, there is so much at stake as far as letting, if you change a calendar, that changes a lot of things. Busing has to change. There's all kinds of different aspects that are behind the scenes that change, and busing is just one of them. Food services is another. The staffing of a school changes if you change the number of days in the calendar. So, and we have 3 different choices. So the district needs to know that sooner rather than later so that they can make all the decisions that they need to make it happen for any of the 3 calendars that a school might choose. In your packet, everybody should have one, and if you don't have one, we have a sign-up sheet. We make 50 of these. I think that should be enough so that every family has one. You have this packet of calendars. There's 3 calendars in there. There's the traditional calendar is the very front one. That would be a calendar that's very much like it is for this school year. The vacation times that we have are about the same. Everything is just about the same as it is this year. The dates are a little different. Okay, that's the calendar we've been using in APS for all the schools for several years now. The next one is called, on the second page, on the back side of that traditional calendar, is called Extended Learning Plan B, Extended Learning Plan A. And that is, let's see. So that's the 5 and 5, and I just want to make sure I had that right. So what that calendar did is it added 5 instructional days on to the instructional calendar, the traditional calendar before school started, and 5 days on from the traditional one at the end. Extended Learning Plan B, which is the one that's after that, basically makes a lot of the vacations that you would have during the traditional calendar just longer. That means summer break would be shorter. Okay, that's a very quick summary of it. It's not exactly what it is, so we're going to go over in that more details. But what it means is that there's more learning during the summer months and longer breaks when you have breaks. So I'll go over that in detail shortly, because it's the one that's the most different from the other 2. The traditional calendar I just told you about that is basically the calendar that we're working on right now. It has first day of school on August 5th. First day for teachers is August 5th. First day of school is August 12th. Last day of school is May 25th. Traditional holidays and breaks. Now on this PowerPoint, you're going to see purple up there, and that's where things are the same. When things are the same, they're in purple, I believe, and we'll go through this in a second. Extended Learning Calendar A is the 5 and 5. And that's, in general, from now on, I'll just describe it as 5 and 5. Because Extended Learning Plan A is a lot to remember. But it's 5 days before and 5 days after with additional hours for professional development. The additional hours for professional development do not happen unless we choose extended learning calendar. If we don't have an extended learning calendar, the time for staff is limited to that 31 hours. Holidays and breaks are aligned to the traditional calendar, so that really the thing that changes on that calendar is that we come back, students are back in school 5 days earlier, and they leave 5 days later from the traditional calendar. Where things get really different is this kind of known as a year-long calendar. It's calendar B. Year-round model aligned with traditional breaks. So the teacher's first day would be July 14th. After a week, the students would come back on the 21st of July. There would be a full week break attached to Labor Day. So instead of a couple days for Labor Day, it would be a full week. That whole week would be off. Full week would be attached, or 3 days would be added for fall break, but it aligns to that traditional calendar. A full week break attached to Thanksgiving, November 23rd to 27th. 2 weeks, which is exactly the same as it would be for the traditional calendar, December 21st to January 1st. 2 days break attached to Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which is January 15th to 18th. 4 days attached to the President's Day, February 10th to February 15th. a 1-week spring break, which is exactly the same as the traditional calendar, a 2-day break attached to the vernal holiday, full week break in May. So that's one that other schools would not get. You know, if you're on the traditional calendar, you're not going to take a break between May 3rd and 7th. 2-day break attached to Memorial Day, May 28th to 31st, and then the last day of school is June 11th. It's a calendar that has students in school with less of a long break during the summer. The additional hours of professional development only come with the extended learning calendars. The teachers will only get that if there's an extended learning calendar. And it would add 48.5 hours of additional PD to the schedule, so they would be working on professional development determined by the instructional council of the school. That is in part a response to, well, it is a response to the Yazzie Martinez versus State of New Mexico goal of professional development to improve academic success of at-risk students, and the instructional council determines, as I said. Voting. Basically, the instructional council, I'm going to read through this real quick, just so that you can be quickly through it. The instructional council meeting must be held for the logistics of the voting to be determined for the staff and the community before the staff and community meeting. Like I said, our meeting happened on the 16th. Logistics for voting are determined by the school's instructional council. The ballot is provided by the district. The instructional council must identify 2 calendar representatives, one an instructional council member and one from the parent and community representative. That doesn't have to be an instructional council member. We've got 2 separate votes, one for the staff and one for the community. We're going to use different colors for those votes, for the ballots, and the staff vote and the community vote must be tallied separately. We have some ballots here. I'll talk about that for a quick second. We have them in English and Spanish. They're going to be white for you all. The way we're going to do this is every family, well, I'll get into that in a second, but every family will get a chance to vote on this. And I'll get into exactly how the ballot works. We're going to collect the ballots. The only thing that's not covered in this PowerPoint is how we're going to collect the ballots. And what we're going to do is when your family turns in your ballot, we're just going to write the family name on this envelope, and we're going to store it. And in case and we're going to keep that up until the point that we count the ballots. Once all the voting is done, we're going to take the ballots out, and then we're going to get rid of those envelopes, and we're not going to attach the 2 to each other. And it's not important for us. The reason that we're doing that is that every family gets just 1 vote, regardless of how many students are in the family that go to the school. And so if there's somebody comes back and says, whoa, 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 we're divorced, dad wants one thing, mom wants the other, we're going to go, okay, what's your name? And we're going to take that ballot, we're going to find it, and we're going to hand it back and say, you guys are going to discover how you're going to determine 1 vote for your family. Because that's the way we're going to do it. We're going to make sure it gets handed back without a whole bunch of trouble for the office. Okay. All voting must be completed by January 31st. The school's calendar decision must be communicated to the associate superintendent by the 12th, and the instructional council minutes and ballots must be archived in the principal's office for 2 years. So I have to have a system for keeping all that stuff. I wanted to make sure, the instructional council decided we wanted a paper ballot. Paper ballots are good because if 1 year from now somebody says that the whole thing was rigged, we can say, okay, here's all the paper ballots, here's how it fell out. And you're gonna find that they're exactly the same because that's how they work. Anybody comes up with that, I've got it kept. We're gonna keep it for 2 years. Here's the voting. Every staff member on campus gets 1 vote. Every family with a child at the school gets 1 vote per family. So if there's a family with 15 children at Los Ranchos, that family gets 1 vote. They don't get 15 votes, they get 1 vote. They get 1 vote. Every staff member gets 1 vote. We'll talk a little bit about how that's tallied and how that works in a second. this is for the instructional council, so I'm gonna skip over it. Here's how the ballot works. There's a two-part ballot. There's a step 1 and there's a step 2. The reason there's 2 steps is because if everybody votes for a traditional, well, if you vote for a traditional calendar and everybody else voted for an extended calendar, we do want your input of which one you would prefer. So we're not gonna, just because you chose the traditional calendar does not mean that we don't want to have your input into which of the 2 calendars. So if you have to have an extended calendar, which one do you want? So that information is gathered there. So let's just go through that. So it's up at the top, it says, please do step 1 before you do step 2. So you're gonna vote for one of 2 things. You're gonna vote for a traditional calendar or an extended learning calendar. And that's right there in step 1. And basically you're choosing if you're gonna do 184 days or 194 plus 80 hours of professional development. Whether you do traditional or the other one, you're both going to go back. Whether you vote for traditional or extended, you're going to vote in that second part because again, it's important that we know which calendar you want. If you want the traditional one, that your voice is still being heard in case the vote comes out that you wanted an extended calendar. If the majority of the staff and the majority of the community vote for a traditional calendar of 184 days, then the traditional calendar is the calendar that is selected by the school. And this just says about the extended learning that I just explained a couple times. If the majority of the staff and the majority of the community select an extended learning plan calendar of 194 days plus 80 hours of professional development, then the majority vote from section 2 determines the selected extended learning plan calendar. In other words, the majority, so if we vote for an extended calendar, then whatever the majority is for the bottom for step 2 is what calendar, extended learning calendar is going to be chosen. I'm going to stop right now because this is where a lot of the questions come, I think, is on the voting and how this ballot works. So I'm going to take, it's now 6 o'clock. I'm going to take about 4 minutes to answer any questions. If you have questions about how the ballot works and how that works, because there are parts that it does get kind of confusing, or if you have a question right now, this is the time to answer that. And then maybe at the end I can answer more questions if there are. If anybody has a question at this point about the ballot, go ahead.
I just have a question. When they are counted out, can we attend? Because
So there's going to be a community member there, there's going to be an instructional council member there, and there's going to be myself there, there's going to be 3 people there. I'll get together with those people if there's a strong desire to have people watch. That's fine. I would rather probably just let us do our work and then show it to you or do an announcement if that's what's necessary. So the question was, let me ask again, say the question about it. Can we have the community watch the counting of the vote? Is that correct for the question? I don't mind doing that. I can't imagine it would be particularly spellbinding for anybody to watch us count sheets of paper. But if there's a need, if there's a desire to have people count the vote, I'll talk to the instructional council and see if they're game for that.
well, we came from a school last year that
Yep.
did the extended year this year. They started, and then from teachers, what I've heard at that school, parents, it didn't really matter what we voted. The extended calendar was pushed through no matter what we really voted. So I just want to make sure that we're being heard here. Like, okay,
Right.
this is paper and you can prove, but also you can take a whole bunch of new paper and make a whole bunch of new crosses. I'm not saying you're going to do this, but
And so the statement was that a parent was at a different school and the process was not done honestly, or the feeling was out there, there was words out there that it was not done honestly, and so that having that be transparent. So let me tell you this, it is an option to do it electronically. I didn't want to have that, I didn't even present that option really to the instructional council as one of the things, and the instructional council thought it would be a good idea to do the paper ballots. I like paper ballots because we're gonna have, so let's talk about that a little bit, because when you turn in your paper ballot as a family member, you're gonna turn it in, you're gonna mark off what you want, it's gonna stuck in an envelope, your family name is gonna be on there, and you're gonna initial on a roster of every family that we have at the school, and you're gonna say that you voted. Okay, so we're gonna have all of those there. That's the first step for that. The same thing will happen for the staff. Okay, we're gonna make sure that there's not more there's not more ballots that are counted than families that are at the school. Okay, that'd be the first check on that. The second thing is the names and checking off on and having everybody initial as they sign off. And we'll be more than happy to share that with everybody as that's happening. Ms. J is the one who's going to be doing that with Anna and the voting in the front office. You're going to come in and you're going to see her, and you're going to hand it in to her, and she's going to have you initial on it. That way, it's not just collected in classrooms, or I'm collecting them just randomly from kids in the hallway, and it's not going to be backpack mail. Adults are going to have to come in and see another adult and do the voting.
Yes, this sounds completely different than what we've been through. We had 24 hours to vote on this, and we had a little note slip that said extended year, yes or no. It was nothing like that. So I just wanted to check my box.
That's it. So that leads me into something else, and then I'll move on. We're going to start the voting tonight. You can vote tonight if you'd like to. If somebody took home a bunch of ballots for some reason, they started to make a bunch of copies, it would not matter, because we're only going to take ballots to another human being. Okay, that's the first step. Also, we're going to collect ballots up through Thursday at 3 o'clock, I believe. Is it correct? And Ms. Hanson is nodding that I've not messed that up. Thursday at 3 o'clock, the voting will end. You can turn in your ballot anytime while the office is open. As long as Ms. J is there to take it, and she can have you sign off that you've done it. You can hand it in between now and 3 o'clock on Thursday, or when we start voting, when we hand out these things tonight. Okay, so that gives plenty of time for you guys to take in this presentation. I'm putting it on YouTube, and then we're going to put it in on YouTube with the Spanish, so if you've got friends that want to see it, if I say something particularly controversial or whatever, I'm happy to have that out there. Because I don't think I'm going to. Yes, ma'am.
Thursday or next Thursday?
This Thursday.
Why not next Thursday if the voting doesn't have to be done until the 31st?
Because we're going to have the staff vote too. So that because the instructional council decision was just to do two these days of voting.
That's a pretty short
It's narrow.
at least through the weekend for families that are not together, and there needs to be some type of
So
communication.
I'm gonna go with what the instructional council came up with as a determination. I'd like to get the voting done, and not to rush the situation, but it's, I feel like we need to get this information out there and get it together. So what's gonna get turned in is this next slide. And it shows a form, and it's gonna have the signatures of myself, a community representative, and instructional council representative. Those three people are gonna sign off that they counted the votes and what the determination from the school was. All of this is gonna be kept in the principal's office for 2 years. You can certainly request to see it anytime you want to. So let's talk about something that definitely is a factor. K5 Plus, I sent home, did a couple robocalls to you all, and I said K5 Plus is not going to happen at Los Ranchos. I got feedback from a PTO meeting that I had that families thought, oh, it's not going to happen at the site for Los Ranchos, like Los Ranchos is not going to be the site. no students at Los Ranchos are going to be able to participate in K-5 plus, period. Regardless, there's Alameda and Mission have been the two other schools that we've combined with the last couple of years to do K-5 plus. In previous years, the funding has been provided by the state to have teachers here to do the summer learning for students called K3 plus at that time, and then last year K5 plus. And the intention was that those teachers would stay with those students into the school year. But because of staffing reasons, we weren't able to do that, especially at a small school like Los Ranchos, and that's why Alameda and Mission were added to our schools to make it bigger sizes, so we could even have a pool of teachers to draw from to do K-5 plus. So, you know, if students are coming from Alameda and Mission to Los Ranchos, and the Los Ranchos teachers are all just doing K-5 or K-3 plus, then they weren't going back to their same teachers. Last year, they said they're going to make you do that again, and we still had K-5 plus, and the district ended up not getting reimbursed by the state. I believe Los Ranchos is one of those schools that got picked up by APS because we had teachers we had a teacher from Mission in 4th grade, we had teachers from Los Ranchos at like kindergarten and 1st grade, I believe, and then different schools from different places. That definitely did not comply with the K-5 plus funding. So the district picked up the cost on that because they didn't want to say no K-5 plus. This year they can't afford to do it. They paid too many dollars to do that last year, and they did it because they didn't want to have families not know about that. So this is a part of this process, and if you don't know that there's not going to be K-5 plus in the summer, and you're voting on the calendar, then that would not be, it would not be honest in my opinion. So, you gotta know that there's no K-5 plus. Now, there are gonna be other educational opportunities offered by the district. Where exactly those are and what they are and how many students will be allowed to go to it or be able to enroll in it, I don't have those exact numbers. The information I got from from a meeting this morning was there'll be a school. It'll have a couple hundred seats available open for students, and it's going to be first come, first served. And they're going to have an enrollment process. Basically you're going to have to go there in person and enroll. So it's the opportunity for that is not as much as it would have been if you had K-5 plus. So that's a factor. And I need to make sure you all understand that there's not going to be a summer learning opportunity at Los Ranchos for this summer. That last paragraph, that last sentence on there is also part of the reason why, is because the teacher has to stay with the students. Has to. Required to. And that includes the Spanish language arts teacher and the SPED teacher. And when we realize that this is a voluntary thing for K-5 plus, that the teachers are here, they have to volunteer to teach K-5 plus. I, as the administrator of the school district, does not mandate a teacher, hey, we're going to go to an A and B schedule. If you're on an A teacher, you're going to do K-5 plus this year. Next year, you're going to do B schedule is going to be K-5 plus. No, I can't do that. It's a voluntary thing. So if there's any break in that schedule, K through 5, then there is not K-5 plus here at Los Ranchos, period. It could happen the day before K-5 plus is going to start, and a teacher could say, I'm sick, I'm out, I can't do this, and they would not have K-5 plus at that site. That's how how serious they've gotten about it. So that's enough about K-5 plus. Unless you have a question, Ms. Herrera, what's your question?
Yeah, the other summer program, that's gonna be like a science-based, hands-on program,
I
right?
believe that is the science-based hands-on program. My intention is to get a hold of Jamie Jacobson, who's the head of curriculum instruction, and say, okay, tell me what's going on. I think her answer is going to be, until we have the calendar vote back about how many schools are going to go year-round, I won't be able to tell you that, Mr. Robinson, about what we're going to offer for that. Because if a school has got year-round school, then K-5 plus, well, you know, you couldn't even have K-5 plus because there's not enough days. It has to be 25 days of learning. And there's not that number of days for the extended learning calendar B, the third calendar.
Would you be able to inform her at that time too that there are Los Ranchos teachers interested and willing to participate in that?
And families,
Yeah, and families.
because we know that Los Ranchos has always been the number one source of students for K-3 and K-5 plus, always has been. We've been the predominant school on those three schools. Okay. Done a lot of talking. I'm going to give you an opportunity now to do a little talking amongst yourselves and look at this as an opportunity and a challenge. We're going to do this a little activity here. And that's why all these poster papers are out on the tables. And it's not going to be very long. We're just going to do some thinking about and get your feedback as a community, as families, about the three different calendar choices and what you feel are some opportunities and what are some challenges with each of the three different calendars. So if you're not around a set of these butcher block papers, these big master big old sticky notes, like this, if you want to come on up here, you can. Yes, Ms. Casada?
So, before we do that, I just have
Sure.
two questions maybe you can clarify.
Yeah.
So, we have 3 calendars.
Yes.
However, high school's not changing. So what are the implications for elementary, middle school for those families? We're gonna have students, let's say one on a traditional and one on an extended learning, or one on a year-round and one on a traditional. And then my second question is, PED has discussed funding it for the coming school year, but we don't have information for the following school year.
Okay.
Is
I'll
that
give you the
correct?
information I have.
Okay.
One, high schools are choosing between 1 or 2 calendars.
Oh, they are, okay, so they're,
And I confirmed that today.
okay.
I trust my sources that were like, no, the high schools are not changing, but I got it from the APS source that there's only 1 or 2, high school's gonna be 1 or 2 calendars. They're gonna be on the traditional calendar, or they're gonna be on the 5 on the front and 5 on the end calendar. High schools are not choosing the year-round calendar for logistical reasons that involve, from my understanding, primarily busing. Because that turns into, it's already gonna be challenging for the transportation department. What are the implications for a student? I make sure I did, so I wanna make sure that part's clear. The second part of your question was, what are gonna be the implications for a student or for a family that has a student at elementary, mid, and high school? So, that's a good, it leads me to a voting actual answer. You get to have input if you have a family, so let's say you're that family. You have a student at elementary, middle, and high. Every one of the schools that you're a family at, you get input into the voting process. So if you have a child at Los Ranchos Elementary School, you get 1 vote for that calendar there. At middle, you get 1, you can say you're at Taylor, you get 1 vote for their calendar over there. And then your oldest, or another child of yours is at Valley, you get to vote at their calendar selection. So you're gonna get 3 different votes, but only 1 vote per family per school. So the implication is, though, that your family could be on potentially three separate calendars, depending on how each one of those schools vote falls out. So yes, is it possible that at Los Ranchos Elementary School, you're on a traditional calendar? At Taylor Middle School, you're on a 5+5, so you just add 5 days on and 5 days in, and, well, then let me flip that. At Taylor, they decide to go year-round, and at the high school, they do 5+5. So your family is no longer on any one calendar for your year. You're on 3 separate calendars, and bless your heart,
So
because I
then-
would not want to be a family in that situation.
In order to have a vote, you have to be enrolled. So let's say we have a 5th grader now who's
Yes.
going into 6th. That family won't have a vote at the middle school level, only the elementary.
So it was talked about, the fifth graders, you know, hey, can we make sure the families that are going from Los Ranchos to Taylor get an input into the calendar that they're gonna have to live with at Taylor? The response back to us was no, because of the multiple feeder patterns that happen. So Los Ranchos is relatively easy. We have Taylor, Taft, and Garfield, sometimes Garfield. That's not so hard. That wouldn't be so difficult. But if you're a gigantic school like, Tierra Antigua, they have 1,500 elementary schools, elementary students, and they have 6 classes of 5th graders, and they're going to 15 or 5 or 6 different middle schools. It was just got crazy land. And they said, no, the votes will stay here. We're just gonna keep the 5th grade votes and they're gonna tally for here. Yeah, the implications are serious. What was there, the third part
The
to your
funding.
question?
So we're funded for the coming school year, but for 21,
Okay.
22.
So the dollar amount that I heard in a meeting, and Ms. Berg and Ms. Hanson were there, is that there's a $100 million funded for this project, for the state, for the 2021 school year. And they expect that money to be able to pay for the 21-22 school year, but nothing is guaranteed for that school year. Okay, so do we know if we're gonna have to vote again or choose something again at this point next year? At this, we would be making another calendar decision. The understanding that I have right now is that if a school chooses this calendar, the intention of the school district is to have the school do this calendar for at least 2 years. I'm not gonna stand by that 100%, but I'm there 90%. I don't think they want to do this more times than they have to. Okay, because I can't say I'm not the legislators. I'm not in legislation, and if this turns out to be a nightmare for them, I think they might just go, we're all going 194. This is the legislators, and they might say this. Right now, they're having the schools do this work. They're not mandating because of Martinez-Yazzie. They're saying schools can go to this. They're giving the schools the opportunity to go to this. Did that answer your question, Ms.
Yes,
Posada?
thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Are there any questions that came from that? Okay. Let's do it this opportunities and challenges, because when I did this, they did this with us as administrators, and they did it with the instructional council when they had a big meeting, all the instructional council reps, and it really kind of brings up gets you thinking about what are the opportunities of having 10 more days in your calendar, and what are the challenges. I think we just heard one of them. Let's say your family you've got a child at elementary, mid, and high. That's going to be a huge challenge for you as a family, and that's the input we want to get back. So here's what we're going to do. In small groups, we'd like to have you brainstorm the opportunities and challenges for the poster calendar. So I've got these posters, and you're going to write on them. And I want you to get together in groups around one of these areas and just have one person write and one person and have other people contribute different ideas. And it's more about getting your ideas down. It's not quality, it's quantity. So, what are the other educational opportunities? When considering an extended calendar, challenges when considering this calendar, and provide time to reach with the rotate. So we're going to have you go to a location. We've got them throughout here. I'm going to start that process right now, and we're going to start with the traditional calendar, and we're going to start there with the opportunities are and what the challenges are. And we're going to give you 7 minutes to do that, and the next one will be 4 minutes, and the next one will be 3 minutes. And if you all want to come up to a poster and participate, that'd be great. And I will start that right now. And the first one we're going to do again is the traditional calendar. So if it says up at the top traditional, that's the one you want to be right for right now. No, just keep it going, Anna. Yeah, just keep it going. Bye. Yeah. Yeah, I'll do that right now. Okay, folks, I'm sorry I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second because somebody brought up an important point. So the staff and the staff and the families both vote for a calendar. If both if the families and the staff do not agree on extending the school year by 10 days, then we stay a traditional calendar. If so, let's say the family says let's extend it, and the staff says no, traditional calendar. If the staff says extend it and the community says traditional, then we stay traditional.
¿Se va a votar hoy o hasta el jueves?
Ahorita puede votar.
Ah,
Si
ok.
no quien decide votar ahorita, puede votar mañana, tiene hasta el jueves para votar.
Ah, ok. Como Nancy, es que Nancy tiene los niños enfermos y no pudo venir a la junta y me dijo que nada más que preguntara a ver si podía votar otro día.
Sí, puede votar hasta el jueves a las 3.
Ah, ok. Ok. Pero ahorita en la oficina tenemos que
No,
pasar con
venga,
usted.
ahorita venga aquí.
Ah, ok. Si puede darme.
Okay. You can rotate to the next calendar, which would be, let's do the ELPA, which is the Extended Learning Plan A. And here's the process, folks. If you want to leave, I think it's great to go through this, and we're going to collect this up, and we're going to look at it, and we're going to make sure we have this information for us. But if you're wanting to know if I'm going to say anything after we get through this little process, here's how this is going to go. We're going to collect the information for ELPA, we're going to do the same thing for ELPB, we're going to put them up, we're going to walk around it so you can see other people's thoughts about the different ideas, and then I'll open it up for questions. And that'll round it out. And I will entertain that question right now. Okay, here's the question. The question was, let's say that there's $100 million out there from the state. And let's say everybody just goes traditional, and that $100 million is just sitting there. What happens to that? I don't have the answer to what happens to that money exactly. It certainly does not come to APS. It only goes to those schools that decide to do the additional 10 days. It's only earmarked in the legal terms and financial terms for providing pay for teachers and the staff and the school to do the 10 additional days. It can't go to, well, I'm not a legislator. They can probably change it to go to something else. Roads, they can change it to go to bridges. But we would not get it. Only those schools that go to the 10 additional days will get a part of that $100 million. I can't answer that question because I'm not a legislator in the finance committee to tell them what their plans are if nobody uses it. But it's a great question. It's a great question. Did that provide you some answers? Okay. So, next up, let's do ELPA, and we'll do that for another 2 minutes. I'm going to answer questions if people have them while you're filling out. Yes, ma'am.
So, like for the 10 additional days, is there already a plan set what's going to happen?
This is a good question. So the question was, what is the plan for those 10 days? What would you do with those 10 days? Well, this is the opportunities and the challenges part. So what it's not for is for something that looks exactly the same as a regular school day. It's supposed to be for something, it's supposed to be expand educational opportunity. Who chooses that is each individual school through their instructional council chooses that. Mr. Robinson does not choose that. He does kind of like this here. He can provide a proposal, but the instructional council is the one who makes the decision about what happens with those 10 additional days.
When we started this year early, the 10 days, the air conditioners weren't working. The kids were just there for busy work. Like, they were roasting in 100-degree room. Like, it was serious, and we were not notified, and these kids didn't work anything. They were just there for attendance, and so I think there should be something in place that justifies these 10 days. And also, I need to know what you teach my kid in 10 days, which you could teach in 78 days. I mean, 10 days won't make it or break it.
Okay, I missed the last part, but the comment was at the start was that you were in a different school when they started this in extended time.
Yes.
And the school was not in, first of all, I did a summer school program, and I was at a school where the classrooms were not in a temperature where students could learn. And so I understand that completely. And we've been here at this school when the swamp coolers have not been working. And students and teachers have a hard time teaching, students have a hard time learning when the temperature is optimal temperature for learning is 67 degrees or 68 degrees. This is one of the reasons they try and get it right there. Can't be too cold, can't be too hot. But we know that our classrooms get too hot. We generally don't have problems with heating at the school, but we do have problems with cooling. So that's part, but the other part is and that's the part I guess.
Yeah, it's just the teachers weren't, the classrooms weren't set up because they didn't have time. Like, it was, everything was too short, everything was pushed. The teachers weren't set up, so the kids were literally just sitting there. They didn't even have a lesson plan for, a weekly lesson plan. There was nothing. So for 10 days, these kids were just sitting there.
Right. So how you use the 10 days is vitally important. One of the great things is about these 10 days, 5 days before and 5 days at the end is that that's not where the special days have to be. The special days could be 5 days right before Christmas and 5 days right after you get back from winter break. And 5 days right before you go to winter break, you could do a 3, 3, and 1. It doesn't have to be right there. There will be 5 days for the teachers to be prepared for school, regardless of the calendar. Until we have a calendar, we can't tell you if there's going to be 10 additional days. We can't tell you what they would be. First, you got to determine if the community, if the families and the staff want to do it, and that's critically important. Okay, does anybody need, so I'm assuming that people moved on to ELPB. Does anybody need more time for any of the poster work? I see one person writing away, I love it. So we'll go for another 3 minutes or so on ELPB, and then we'll post them up and let you guys walk around and see what people thought, and give me a chance to walk around and see what people thought too. And as for everybody who's still here, thank you for coming. Okay, what we're going to do at this time is I'm going to start putting up posters along the wall so you all can start reading what everybody else has to do. We're going to do what's called a gallery walk, and you can walk through and see other people's comments. And then I will stick around after that is through, and I will take questions from everybody.
¿Estás grabando? Edgar, ahí estás.
packed. It was like extended school year, sort of, and we've never heard anything. Like there was a meeting, they always had like dinners, and it was on the Thursday, and then on Friday it was just kind of nothing. Because the kids were sent home on Thursday. I'm like, it really makes sense that this is something else, but if you are coming out in the back office and doing whatever, and I just didn't trust the principal. I had issues with her, like, it's just like, it's just different, you know? Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I was like, how is this going to be that? Because I want to know how does him feel. And I think everybody wants to feel that way.
Estoy viendo la cámara. Ve aquí. Mira la cámara. Aquí. Aquí quédate. Ay, hola. 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 No, vete atrás de la cámara. Aquí quédate.
Yeah. I just went through it
¿Puedes
and
ver? Sí. ¿Sí también? Sí. Oye, creo que está apagado. A ti te veo. No. Mira. Ha estado prendido por 2 horas, por 1 hora. Oiga. Hey, Ian. Hi, Abby. Hi, Giovanni. No, that's Giovanni. So someone has to be forming from this. Someone has to dance. Yeah, do dance. I would dance. You. Go dance, Abby. Look at that.
You've got an opportunity to walk around and see what other people said. We've got ELPA right there, ELPD there, and traditional over here. And there's one group working back there.
Go backwards. I can't see you.
And if you have questions, it's probably best to handle them.
Hey guys.
Thank you everybody for coming.
Hi. Not it for tag. Not it. What? I don't want to play. Not it.
Hey guys.
Has this been recording the whole time?
The whole time.